since I crossed the hill and o'er the moor and valley. Such heavy thoughts my heart do fill since parting with my Sally. I seek no more the fine and gay, for each does but remind me how swift the hours did pass away with the girl I left behind me. Shall I forget the night the stars were bright above me, and gently lent their silvery light when first she vowed to love me. But now I'm bound to Brighton camp, kind heaven, then pray guide me, and send me safely back again to the girl I left behind me. My mind her image full retains, whether asleep or waking. I hope to see my jewel again, for her my heart is breaking. But if ever I should have a chance to go back across the ocean, although my love may be lost to me, I'll find another maiden. Shall honey taste no more, the dove become a ranger, the falling waters cease to roar, ere I shall seek to change her. Each mutual promise faithfully made by her whom woes betide me, and true the last that loves me well, and the girl I left behind me. The brigadier commands the right and guard the ford and river. The main guard charged to attack, the flanking party shiver. The man who wears the stars and stripes, and in the field they find me. I will lay down my life and die for the girl I left behind me. Then may the union be preserved, while love will be the chain, sir. But if any of our rights are touched, I hope that we shall gain, sir. And if I should as a soldier fall, for one of us she'll pine, sir. And may her arms entwine another man like the girl I left behind me.
On the 19th of September, our army set out from Claymore's Cove. Down in Georgia, down by the Chickamauga, and I knew that the fighting was gonna be close. Down by the Chickamauga, by the Chickamauga, down by the Chickamauga, we saw our boys laying in rows. For 2 long days we heard the sound of cannonballs tearing through the trees like a summer rain. For 3 long days we heard the sound of rifle fire making our men scream out in pain. Down by the Chickamauga, by the Chickamauga, down by the Chickamauga, we saw our boys laying in rows. Now when the smoke cleared, there was thousands laying dead. The river ran red with the blood of the brave. Brother fought by my side, and I was there when he died, the day we made our stand at Snodgrass Hill. Down by the Chickamauga, by the Chickamauga, down by the Chickamauga, we saw our boys laying in rows.
Oh, yeah, down by the Chickamauga. I'm only minutes away from the battle. In fact, or the battlefield. In fact, probably some parts of it were actually on the place where I live. To be honest, those battle lines were pretty long. Thank you, Broski. I have another one that is the theme for the show, Bibles and Battlefields. The reason it's called that, this is really when you go back, and I was looking at um, starting a podcast again after many years of not doing it. This was my theme, and it's been out there for a long time. I was going to have a YouTube channel called Bibles and Battlefields, and it was going to be based around battlefields and faith and war. And I still may do elements of what I was going to do in that show for this show. Just haven't had the opportunity to get the footage yet, but some of that I was going to do. So this has been sort of in the box for a long time. And thankful for AI and some of the music. I didn't want to steal anybody's work. And these are all creations of mine, ideas of mine, and more that'll be coming. And it's not meant to be, it's history. So it's not meant to be totally one-sided. You know, we, Southern, and I definitely, you know, have read up a lot on the Southern armies and stuff. But I look at faith from all sides of it, and there are people that I respect all over, you know, as far as their abilities, and there are some that I don't. So when I look at it, it's looked at in different ways. I've been covering Union as well as Confederate, so it's not meant to be totally one-sided. Although certainly I had family on both sides, like most people did, especially here in the South. We've been looking at for 3 weeks now. This is the fourth show, the Battle of Chickamauga. It's going to take a while. We're looking at it in many different ways, and want to thank Southern Shadows, the ghost tour company in Chickamauga, for being on with me for 2 shows. And the last one we talked about General Hood. And Miss Courtney will be back. I sure hope. I haven't asked her, but I'm going to ask her. I didn't want to overload her. She's trying to run a business, a new business, and all that. And this is a very busy time for them, I'm sure. But we definitely are going to come back together. It's someone that I want on the show on an ongoing basis. She's a wealth of information. She loves and has a passion for it like I do. And she's from right here in the area that I live. So not that we can talk about whatever battlefield, but I just started here because I'm close to it and been on it so many times in my life. Tonight, I want to look at Patrick Cleburne. Love Patrick Cleburne. It's not meant to be an exhaustive look at him. It is only an hour show. But it is a look, and I want to look at specifically an overview. And then number 2, what did that look like at Chickamauga? And of course, we can touch on the end of the story for him as well. One of my favorite generals. I love everything about him. And one of the most heroic, I believe, guys that was in either army. And we have done video from the Cleburne Monument here at Ringo Gap. Hello, Watchman. And we have looked at, different monuments and around to different generals, but, his story, the pinnacle of his career per se, and really the downfall of his career to a degree until his death was right around this area. Battle of Ringo Gap. He protected the supply lines and the wagons and everything to get into Dalton, and held off the superior force, got the high ground, and did a great job, and he deserves that. It's a beautiful monument. And I helped to raise funds for that, as many did. And again, shout out to the Ringo Telephone Company, who really brought it home with a $50,000 donation. God bless them. We were going to lose that monument. But anyway, looking at Patrick Cleburne, I wanted to look at a little bit of overview. And you may know, it's not to say I know everything. You may know more than myself, and that's okay too. Let me find my my thing here. And it always happens when you go to pull up. Okay, here we go. I wanted to just a quick overview of Cleburne, who was in all these major campaigns. Early in life, of course, he lived in Ireland. Wish I knew how he talked. I mean, he had to have that broke accent and everything. I just love it. I wish we had recordings, Unfortunately, that was not something that we had. Um, really, Barry, I didn't know that. It seems like I remember recently going to that and somebody stole the plaque from the Ringo telephone. I don't know about that. I'll find out. I mean, I'm here. I'll find out. And we're doing live shows from Ringo, and we've done one at the monument. Of course, he early on. Of course, he was in Ovens, County Cork, Ireland. He was born either March 16th or 17th, 1828. He was from a Protestant middle class family. Father was a doctor. Mother died when he was an infant, and he grew up in a blended family with several siblings and half siblings. He originally hoped to study medicine, which will come back into his life later, but he failed the entrance exam for Trinity College. A smart guy, but just made to be a general. But, it's tough, medical stuff. I've had to do some of those tests before, and on a minor scale. They are tough. Which led him to enlist in the British Army's 41st Regiment of Foot in 1846. He left that army, of course. So he's got some battle experience here and potato wars and all, and learning the military life. And he left, and he arrived in the United States in 1850. What a pinnacle time! A lot of things happened around that time, 1850. You look at genealogy; it's like you can go to 1850. It was one of the census years. You can find a lot of things, but obviously they were coming out of the Mexican War, and they're going into again the argument over westward expansion, slave versus free state, the balance of power in Congress, all of that, and so what a time to arrive in America. Barry says the Ringo site there has a pocket part just like the one at Resaca and the one at Cassville. They both have bronze plaques, and we replaced the one at Cassville that was stolen. And unfortunately, there's jacklegs and idiots all over. And what really ticks me off is when they dig up Confederate graves. Boy, that burns me up. And they're nothing but meth heads. That's what it is, man. They're looking for. They'll go out there and rob a grave and thinking there might be a medal or something in it. So when you mark those graves, that's like, oh, we need to go rob that. Ridiculous. So when the war began, he joined the Yale Rifles, local militia that became part of the 1st Arkansas Infantry because he was living out in Helena. And, he before the war, he had worked as a pharmacist, even a lawyer, and even a delegate to the Democratic Convention in 1858. He loved the South. He really identified with them and their fight. Probably thinking, a lot like the battles that he had in Ireland versus, those who were oppressing them there. Yeah, they do dig them up. It happened. We've caught some they haven't caught. They'll just leave it all dug up. They try to dig down and get Civil War artifacts and stuff off the graves. It has happened. Or they'll just topple the stones out of meanness. Idiots. But yeah, broski. So he really embraced. He loved being in America. He loved the South, and he was very loyal to the South to the very end. He sure was. He rose quickly through the ranks. That's one thing about him. He rose very, very quickly. You can recognize greatness when you see it. Yeah, it's horrible, man. It's horrible, and it's happened in cemeteries not far from me. I haven't heard of one in a while, thank goodness, but it does happen. He was in nearly every major Western theater campaign. Shiloh, what a great battlefield. I hate what happened there, but if you've never been to Shiloh, Savannah, Tennessee, oh man, you can just feel something when you ride into that battlefield. I've been there a couple of times. Richmond was wounded. Perryville, he was a horse shot. He was wounded twice. In fact, he had to take some time off. He was wounded. He had to leave the battle. He was shot in the mouth, and he was injured, and so he had to recuperate. He didn't like it, but he couldn't talk. He couldn't give orders, so he had to pull back. But he recovered. Stones River, part of that Tullahoma campaign as they're coming down through Murfreesboro and everything. Then Chickamauga, Ringo Gap, which is, again, that's the high point. Pickett's Mill, Atlanta campaign, and obviously Franklin is where he died. We'll talk about that in a minute. He earned the nickname Stonewall of the West. And I could see that because of how brave he was. Barry says, I heard that Cleburne attended public debates and speeches, which was common back then. It would seem like social media has replaced that today. Well, it very much was public debate. In fact, one of the things we did, and I just happened to have, I pulled this out of its box. I have had this a while, and I'm trying to remember. This is the 109th SCV reunion. I've still got my medal that we bought for that as part of the program. I helped a lot with this. And when it was a great event. I really had a good time. We were part of this event. We did a lot of work there. I could tell you so many stories from that event. Yes, they called him the Stonewall of the West, and he well deserved. And Patrick Cleburne, I have a print from that. We did a print, and he's on the medal. And anyway, he was one of the best, if not the best, divisional commander. And he should have rose in rank, but he didn't. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I have a print. I need to get it put up in here that I bought. I've never framed it, but I have it. And it's a copy. It's not one of the number ones or nothing, but it's an awesome print. And I've need to get that hung up. But he was very, very brave. In 1863, and I want to look at some things here in a minute, but he did. He wanted to win. That's what's he wanted to win. He was in the politics of it, and he proposed arming African Americans, which happened late war, but too late, and granting them freedom for exchange for military service. And he was blacklisted for this. No pun intended. He was blacklisted. He never rose in rank again. He did that at Dalton, and he didn't let him hold him back. It was wrong what they did to him, and that was that Richmond cabal that wanted to control everything, and they found a way to keep him beat down. This guy should have been one of the highest ranked generals. I mean, he no fear, and he got it done. He always got it done. I said every battle was a great success, but more often than not, he won in what he did. So the idea, the letter died. They wasn't going to let that get out. And so no matter how great he was, he never rose in rank again. And just to give you the backstory, like he died at Franklin. That was a brutal battle. It killed the Army of the Tennessee for the Confederacy. They went on to Nashville, even worse. They were not even as big then. And then a few hundred made it to Greensboro, North Carolina, and surrendered as that part of the Army. He was only 36 years old. And he just said that he was facing the enemy as he was dying. And he was taken back to Helena and buried there. And so what's his legacy? Well, historians rank him among the best division commanders of the war. They describe his tactical skill, personal courage, and loyalty, both to Ireland and to the South, made him a unique figure in American military history. He remains the highest-ranking Irish-born officer in the United States military history. This is according to one source I have. I think that's still true, but we would have to check. But he was in command. I wanted to give a little bit of numbers here. Let me find that of kind of who he had at the Battle of Chickamauga. And that is not what I wanted to see here. Here we go. Cleburne's division. So Cleburne's division. You stayed at the inn at Court Square in Charlottesville building. So, yeah, you talked about that. Of course, Chickamauga was by accident in many ways. There was a lot of flanking going on, a lot of things. The Union Army had split their command. There were so many generals that from Rosecrans on the Union side to Bragg on the Southern side, they were failures all the way around, and it was a very costly for both sides, and it hurt the South worse. We'll look at some of the numbers in a minute. Because of the numbers that they lost, they couldn't afford that. But in his division was made up of his escort. He had Sanders' company, Tennessee Cavalry, as his escort. Little's Brigade, which is you'll find that name listed on monuments in the park. Detached, Woods Brigade, 16th Alabama, 45th Alabama, in the 33rd Alabama Regiment and the 18th Alabama Battalion, 32nd and 45th Mississippi and 15th Mississippi Battalion sharpshooters, Polk's Brigade, and the 1st Arkansas, 3rd and 5th Confederate, 2nd Tennessee, 35th Tennessee, and the 48th Tennessee. Gessler's Brigade, among them he had the 19th and 24th Arkansas, the 6th Texas Infantry, 10th Texas Infantry, 15th Texas Cavalry, and the 17th, 18th, 24th, and 25th Texas Cavalry. All those units were dismounted. They got down and fought. They didn't just always ride. Artillery had Calverts from Arkansas, Douglas from Texas, and Simples from Alabama. His staff was very capable and very devoted to him, and so they were a good unit. Now, he wasn't right at the battle when it got started, so he was a few miles away trying to make it in to the battle. And there is some interesting notes about, I was reading some of the things about him around this battle, and I probably have read them and forgot them, but I don't remember all of them as we think about some of those things. But I do want to give you some of what he had to say around this battle and then some about it. And some of the things that were written on the 19th, of course, when it started, the first day of battle, it opened, it was a Saturday, just after daylight. The Union forces, George Thomas became known as the Rock of Chickamauga. He's a lot of things named after him down here. For the Union side, his division was ordered to Jay's Sawmill, which, if you go down, it's not there now, but they have a marker set up for that, to confront what he thought would be a lone brigade. Instead, they ran right into General Nathan Bedford Forrest on Reed's Bridge Road, which is known now, or Reed's Bridge back then. And Forrest was all in the middle of this, and he was wanting to. They were supposed to destroy that part of that army, and that didn't get done. And at the end of the battle, I've always read that he threatened to kill Bragg. He was so mad at him because he didn't do his duty. Of course, Bragg was replaced after this battle. The two forces clashed. The woods was very dense. It wasn't so much of artillery here because a lot of the woods, it was farming, but there's also a lot of woods. There was some artillery, but not as much in some battles. The fighting compelled Bragg to shift some of his forces to the right of the battle line. By 1 p.m., the battle there reached a lull, and the fighting began to shift toward the middle of the Confederate line. By the way, Bragg was slow here, which happened at several battles. They should have been up and ready to go early, and a lot of times they would sit around half a day planning, plotting. Honestly, sometimes afraid to make a move. They were, it was like a chess match, and they would wait till late, and they didn't have enough time to get the job finished. So this was sort of kind of was leading up this first day of battle. They should have been fighting earlier and didn't. All morning, the fighting rumbled southward, roughly following the Lafayette Road, which runs right through the old Federal Road. It was Lafayette Road, or Lafayette. We never say that. Passing the Confederate divisions of Cheatham, Walker, and then Stewart. Both sides took heavy casualties, but neither gained an edge. Around 4 p.m., now here we are all the way at 4 p.m., Confederate Major General A.P. Stewart launched a charge that pushed back the Federal center across the Lafayette Road. And when you go down the road that goes through the battlefield, you kind of have this, at least on the first day and even second day, Federals on one side and cavalry on the other. Also, sometimes those were pushed back and forth. But that's kind of how you can look at that when you're going through the park, which runs basically north to south through the park. Let's see, so it nearly carried the fight, but this attack stalled. To the south, General John B. Hood, who got injured again, he was already injured, got injured again at this battle. He had some success early on driving his opponent on Stuart's left, but he gained no significant advantage for the fighting. Bragg needed to crush the Federals, which he didn't do. Hope lay within General Patrick Cleburne. Now we're going to go back to Cleburne, whose division will soon have an opportunity to change the dynamic of the battle. His men, having listened to cannons going off all morning, are about to enter the fight. Now, this is already after 4 o'clock. So Cleburne ordered his men to move his division northward to Thedford's Ford, And this battle really was made up of crossing fords as well and trying to, get in either side of that, and water supplies as well. Clay ordered the move there to Thetford Ford, there to cross the Chickamauga Creek and report to General Leonidas Polk, who would direct him into line. Cleburne set his men on the 6-mile march along a dirt road, which was clogged by marching troop wagons and artillery. A little further up the road, and observing Cleburne's men marching their distinctive blue and white banners, General Forrest remarked to a subordinate, "Do you see that large body of infantry marching this way in columns of fours? That is General Patrick Cleburne's division. Hell will break loose in Georgia in about 15 minutes. So that tells you what General Forrest thought of General Cleburne. This guy wasn't no slouch. He wasn't a coward. He didn't go slow. He did his duty. He was brave, and he was fighting from the front. I like that quote. Arriving ahead of his men at Thetford Ford, Cleburne received orders to continue northward to reinforce the right wing of the army under Polk, General Polk. Bragg's plan was to attack the Federal Army on its left flank, cut it off from Chattanooga, drive it southward to McLemore's Cove, which is a beautiful area, by the way, and thereby destroy it. General D.H. Hill's corps, including Cleburne's division, which this guy's great-grandfather, which I'm getting some of this information, was in. Artillery was firing in the east as Cleburne's men reached Thetford's Ford in the late afternoon, moving his men along immediately. The troops took off their shoes and pants, and holding their clothing and rifles high, they crossed the creek and resumed their march for the 2 more miles over ground in which the battle had been raging all day. They arrived near the extreme right of the Confederate position just as the sun was setting. He should have a mistake here. At about 5 p.m., Cleburne formed his tired men in a line of 300 yards behind Liddell's and Cheatham's divisions, which were lying prone in a long skirmish line. When General Hill rode up, he ordered Cleburne to be ready for an attack, even though it meant an evening fight. So this is one of the few times, and you'll see placards to it, the night battle, Cleburne's night battle, it's sometimes called. It wasn't very effective, which night battles didn't tend to be. And so, thank you, Broski. And so, but it was one of the few times during the whole war that there was a night battle. I mean, you just didn't fight at night or in the winter. It just didn't do that. But because they got such a late start, that he was ready for that. Let's see here. The Federals were posted behind defensive breastworks, albeit hastily constructed, and they offered heavy artillery and small arms fire. Cleburne personally deployed his brigades in a line. He placed General Sam Wood's brigade, which included the 32nd 45th Consolidated Mississippi Regiment, in the center with Lucius Polk's regiment on the right and Dressler's on the left at 6 p.m. Now we're at 6. Cleburne issued the order to advance. His troops passed through the ranks of Liddell's prone men, who gave them a cheer as they marched forward in a single rank into the twilight through smoke-filled woods. Cleburne wrote this, "In my front," he wrote this after the battle, "were open woods, with the exception of a clearing fenced in front of my center, the ground sloping upwards as we advanced. Ordering the brigades to direct themselves by Wood's center brigade and preserve brigade distance, I moved forward, pressing over the first line, and was in a few moments heavily engaged along my right and center. The enemy, posted behind hastily constructed breastwork, opened a heavy fire on both small arms and artillery. In this attack, Colonel Lowry's 32nd and 45th, we mentioned, of Wood's brigade, was among the first to strike the enemy. Polk and Dressler advanced through the thick and dark woods, and they got discombobulated in these woods, by the way. I mean, there's all kinds of stories of them running into each other, just, trying to find your unit. I can hear the sounds of battle. Where's my unit at? I mean, it got really mixed up. So sometimes enemies would just physically run into each other. In the center lay cleared Winfrey Field directly in front of Wood's men. As they stepped upon the ground and crossed the field, the Federals let loose a devastating fire. Years later, Lowry recalled, "My regiment charged gallantly through an open field on the most exposed part of the line. His regiment aimed at its attack at the enemy's barricaded fence at the far edge of the Winfrey Field." In his official report, he said, "The advance was accordingly made, and I soon past a line of our troops lying down. As I approached an open field in my front, my skirmishers were soon engaged in the skirmishers of the enemy. I pushed my line of skirmishers forward as rapidly as possible, but their advance was slow as the ground was hotly contested. My main line gained rapidly on the skirmishers so that by the time the main line reached the first fence, they received a volley from the enemy's main line, which was behind the next fence, about 200 yards distant. My main line then commenced firing as the skirmishers in their front retired to their rear, and the whole line was soon engaged. I pushed my regiment forward as rapidly as possible, but their advance was slow, and they were compelled to pass through an open field against a line of battle of the enemy strongly posted behind a fence. The advance, however, was steady, and the enemy's line began to give way as we advanced within 40 or 50 yards of the fence. Up to this time, the enemy had fired rapidly, but as it was already getting dark, they overshot us, which served a purpose, only killing 5 of my men and wounding about 20, which was a small number considering their great advantage. During the advance, some of their brigades got out of alignment, which we mentioned, and some units fell back. In the confusion and terror of the nighttime battle, combatants on both sides fired into friendly ranks. This happened sometimes. And Cleburne reported, for half an hour, the firing was the heaviest I had ever heard. It was dark, however, and accurate shooting was impossible. Each party was aiming at the flashes of the other's guns, and few of the shot from the other side took effect. In the darkness and smoke, the fire was mostly inaccurate, and men desperately tried to distinguish friend from foe. It's an amazing reporting there from the general, which again is about 5 minutes from where I'm sitting right now. It's really only maybe 7 minutes. I could drive and be at this spot. Having crossed the field and clambered over the first line of entrenchments, Lowry's men then came under fire from the enemy's main works about 200 yards behind. The division lines by now had become confused and overlapping. Because of fear of shooting into friendly troops, Lowry ordered a ceasefire. By then, Cleburne had ordered Major Hotchkiss, whose batteries were behind Wood's brigade, to bring up his artillery in front of the brigade. Hotchkiss, who was wounded in the attack, later reported, quote, he let fly the dogs of war into the Yankee ranks, end quote. With double canister within 60 yards of the enemy's breastworks, the artillery fire, combined with pressure from Polk's brigade on the right, forced the enemy to fall back into the heavy woods. Colonel Lowry ordered his men to hold the position while he reorganized the 32nd and 45th Regiment for a further advance. In the meantime, General Hill rode to Lowry and ordered him to hold the position until further order from Cleburne. By now, Wood's brigade had taken the enemy's position, capturing 3 artillery pieces, 2 regimental colors, and 100 prisoners. In the struggle, it had also killed Colonel Philemon Baldwin of the 6th Indiana, who was commanding the 3rd Brigade. Further pursuit became impossible in the darkness, so around 9 p.m., it's way late, never hear this, Cleburne halted his brigades. For all the fighting and terror, the attack had succeeded in pushing the Federals back only 300 yards. Rebel skirmishers were placed a quarter-mile in advance of the soldiers, who slept without campfires. You hear about this often down here. It was a very cold night, and there was lack of water on the Confederate side. And so it was not a fun night. This was a bad night after a day of fighting, cold, no fires, and they can also hear the enemy entrenching themselves, so they know what they're facing in the morning for an advance. It was miserable, they said, near freezing on the temperatures. Some of them dozed with Federal dead troops for their pillows in this night. Everyone could hear the groans of the injured and dying, and they also could hear the sounds again of the axes going and the trees falling as they're getting, the Federals are trying to entrench. Of the results of the fight, this night fight, author Stephen E. Woodworth comments, quote, 30% of the best division in the Army of Tennessee had become casualties while inflicting equal losses on the enemy, and that was no bargain for the Confederacy. These were bloody battles. I mean, the 57th Georgia Infantry took a 50% casualty rate in one of the fields. I mean, it was horrible. As Cleburne's attack closes the first day of fighting, losses were great on both sides. One historian estimates casualties for Confederates as high as 9,000. The Federal loss could have been as many as 7,000. There was one encouragement for the Confederates, however. The long-awaited General James Longstreet, Old Pete, who had been dispatched by Lee to the south. Took them forever to get there. They came up through Ringgold. In fact, he was almost captured. He bluffed some Federals out. He was almost captured on his way to the battlefield. He had arrived overnight at Bragg placed Longstreet in command of the left wing of the army, and that made the difference the next day. It was his troops that made the breakthrough when the Federals opened a gap up and realigned some of their brigades, and that turned the whole thing the second day. So it was a stalemate, really, on the first day. It was very ugly, a lot of death, a lot of dying, some prisoners, and these men have no campfires, probably no food, maybe something they can munch on, no water. And, after you've had that gunpowder in your mouth and everything, I never fired the bullets, but I've fired the gunpowder. I can tell you, it dries you out really bad. From D.H. Hill's report of the first of that day's action in 1863, he wrote, "In the afternoon, I received an order to report in person to the commanding general at Thetford's Ford and to hurry forward Cleburne's division to the same point. Soon after, Breckinridge was ordered to relieve Hindman at Lee and Gordon's Mills, which is right behind the facility that I work at. It's right, the old Federal Road would come down and go in front of that. I found upon reporting to the commanding general that while our troops had been moving up the Chickamauga, he said the Yankees had been moving down and thus outflanked us and had driven back our right wing. Cleburne was ordered to take position on the extreme right and began an attack. We did not get into position until after sundown, but then advanced in magnificent style, driving the Yankees back some 3/4 of a mile. We captured 3 pieces of artillery, a number of caissons, 2 stand of colors, and upward of 300 prisoners. Our own loss was small and fell chiefly upon Wood's brigade, which had to cross an open field and encounter breastworks upon the opposite side of it." There's a little bit of flowery words there. Most of that I say was true, but those losses were pretty heavy. He also paid a compliment of Cleburne's men. This is what I wanted to get to because we're talking about Patrick Cleburne tonight. He said, quote, "I have never seen troops behave more gallantly than did his noble division, and certainly I never saw so little straggling from the field." Amazing. And this guy was a credit to the South, and it's unfortunate what they, how they did him and did not let him rise in rank after because of the letter that he wrote. Of course, we know the next day they do turn the army. They outflank them with that gap is made, and the Federals are in full retreat all the way into Chattanooga, up through Rossville into Chattanooga. The Confederates didn't follow but so far. General Thomas, the Rock of Chickamauga, made the stand and helped to get some of those troops out of there. And they eventually withdrew and went in Chattanooga themselves. And it was a win for the Confederacy, but it was also a loss. 2 reasons. One, they didn't destroy the Federals. They let them get a hold of Chattanooga and be entrenched there. And number 2, they lost too many men they lost men they could not afford to lose. And this would hurt them as they went in the Atlanta campaign. The army's getting a little smaller as they go. Still a major fighting force. But that's a lot of men to lose. A lot of men. He fights again. He's hero at Ringgold Gap. He is fighting all the way through Georgia. This Atlanta campaign, the 100 days of battle, as they go to Atlanta, they're being entrenched and everything. And as the army right after Chickamauga was, the Army of Tennessee was given over back to Johnston, General Johnston. Bragg was demoted, from command, and he should have been. Johnston got the men some money, some food. He stopped. There was a lot of battlefield executions for fleeing. He welcomed some of those back, and encouraged them to come back and be a part of the army. About 30,000 strong, I think, is what if I remember right. But he kept burning bridges behind him and going towards Atlanta. Me and Miss Courtney talked about this, how in Richmond, the other generals, including Hood, are bashing his moves and saying he's given up all of the South, and here we are at Atlanta. And so right before Atlanta, Johnston is replaced by President Jefferson Davis with General Hood. And that move eventually was not good because Hood has been convalescing. He got no use for an arm. He lost his leg at the battle. They took it off in Tunnel Hill, if I remember right. But he was highly injured. Drinking the laudanum, was not really fit to be in command at that point. And he hits Franklin and Cleburne didn't think it would work. He didn't think it would work. 5 dead generals later, including himself, and a loss of most of the Army of Tennessee in that battle, it was proved right. It was a bad decision, and yet that didn't stop. They went to Nashville, went across another great, plus they could have caught the Federals sleeping. There was so many things they didn't do right. But they go to Nashville, another long advance upon open ground. You can read Sam Watkins' book, and he talks about both those battles. It's a miracle any of them made it out alive. But that's what they say. That's why a lot of people are mad at Hood, because they say he essentially killed the Army of the Tennessee. He was destroyed under his command. And truthfully, it was. Even though I have a lot of respect for him in a lot of ways, for the type of guy he was, I don't think he should have been overall commander ever. I just don't think that was a role for him. It proved to be not a wise decision. Not that Johnson probably needed to bow up and follow them more, but he didn't have enough resources. So he was keeping the Army together. And so Cleburne dies there, and his legendary status as Stonewall of the West is fully intact. And again, you can see that. Now, when we were getting the monument ready for here, and I told you a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, Hank Williams Jr., the singer, he's big into history and wanted to finish paying for that and move it up there. We got wind of it, was able to get the telephone company to put the rest of the money in, and because they were going to take that monument to Franklin, because that's where he died. But this is where he's made famous. This is what he was known for. I could see arguments both ways, but the monument is beautiful. I love how it turned out. There's a lot of money raised for that. The Cleburne Society and all them, they're happy with it, and it's a testament to that. Well, in some cases there were, Barry, that there were already some serving in the Army. They were, but not in a large scale. And again, when you're talking about more over Louisiana way, that feeling was probably a little bit different over there than it was in the deep part of the South that we are in. But he did make the argument for Army of the Confederates. General Ruggles introduced the idea, and they accepted, but they had no more men. They had nothing to give. They were desperate at that point, absolutely desperate for men. Now it could have turned the day. I mean, it had, again, I'm not saying it was right to have slaves. What I'm saying is that they would give them away to get their freedom, which has happened in armies before across the world, and it would have. They had millions of them. Definitely could have had them. Of course, the bigger picture, the British and the French refused to enter except for really selling weapons and observers. They refused to get in the battle. The South needed more men, and they just couldn't get it. And it was just a battle of attrition. They fought hard. That war lasted a lot longer than they thought. They thought it was going to be a few months at the most. So, yeah. In Georgia, Joseph Emerson Brown was actually turning out prisoners from the Atlanta prison to defend Atlanta. Well, and they were desperate, man. They didn't have enough men to guard the prisoners at Andersonville, deep south, South Georgia and Irwin County, wasn't that? Anyway, I think that's right. Anyway, they didn't have. By this time, it's getting bad. 1864 was a tough year, and even though it rolled into 1865, the writing was on the wall. Now, again, the Army of Northern Virginia was still a pretty powerful force, but they were outnumbered. Barry says, one question I had was so many soldiers needing shoes and some of them their clothes were in tatters. Well, they did a lot, Barry. They did. Now, but I will tell you that Sam Watkins took some things from a dead soldier at Chickamauga, and it repulsed him so much he wouldn't do it again. He just could not look in the face of that. It tormented him. I can't do it. So, but they did do that. The best supplier for the Southern Army was dead Union soldiers, obviously. Food, weapons, clothes, stuff. So absolutely. But see, I understand, Barry, too, those uniforms wouldn't last but a few months. And there were months that went by sometimes before they ever engaged the enemy, depending on the units. So their clothes was off their backs already. Their shoes were done. I mean, if it went 6 months in between a battle or even 3 or 4 months, they're out there in the weather and they're marching and going through water and all this stuff. Again, they showed, taking their shoes off in their pants. They didn't want to get those wet. But yeah, they would just, the elements would destroy what they had. But yeah, when they had opportunity, they did. There was one battle, I'm trying to think of which one it was, but it happened at more than one, where they had to threaten their soldiers because they would run through the camps. They would surprise the Federals, and they would run through the camps, and they would be finding, they're starved to death, and they're finding, wine, and they're finding, nice food and stuff. Some of it's still cooking as people are left out there. And so they're stopping to get all this stuff, and they're saying, attack the enemy, attack. These guys are thinking, fill the belly. Get me some shoes, get me some food, get me some booze, get me whatever. Yes, Barry. They rushed into it. The South was grossly prepared for the war. That is why Joseph Emerson Brown dealt with the railroad sides. It was just, they were in a war fever. The whole South was. And, so they definitely were not prepared. Well, and you think pre-war, the Union or the United States military was only about 30,000. They didn't need that many. So they, Lincoln calls for the 75,000 volunteers. And, there's a lot of men joining in the South, but they've got to train them, get them equipped, uniforms. The early uniforms was very confusing, as you know. They were very close in color. That's why the battle flags became important, because they were shooting at their own. They didn't know who the enemy was. So the uniforms were very close. They were variations. They developed over time in different theaters of war. Those uniforms developed and were very different. But a lot of them were wearing their farm clothes. Certainly the pants, they might have a Confederate jacket on, but they were wearing the shirt and, they would have got their shoes. But the pants and all, when I reenacted, I portrayed wearing just civilian pants, and it looked perfect for that. I was able to get a shell jacket, and it didn't match up because it wasn't supposed to. They weren't perfectly outfitted because they didn't have the uniforms to do it, and they were wore out. They were taking what they could get. As we know, they turned the buckles upside down, right? From the Federals, so they Southern nation, but they were, getting what they could from that. They were the best supplier, and that was all through the war. And that was another thing. Where do you send the supplies? You don't want them captured. And some railroad lines the Confederacy didn't have hold of, and they were trying to get those supply in late war. In 1865, that was the problem. Lee was trying to get food and supplies to his men and was having a hard time. And they were not finding any food in the foraging and all that. His army was starving, and they hardtack if they had it, and they didn't have. They were railroad cars full of stuff. They just couldn't get it to them. It was really collapsing on them. The Republican Blues, the Jasper Greens, many early military units have blue uniforms already. Yeah. So it's fun. I have a book somewhere that I bought years ago that showed some of the variations of the uniforms, and depending on area, unit, and some of them are very ugly. Some of those uniforms are very ugly. But anyway, they show the variations that across the war, from the beginning. And you had your militia, military academies and stuff like that. So some of those had uniforms. So all this stuff was being put in place. But you're right, they were not prepared, and they wanted to hurry up and get in the fight. And Lincoln calls for the 75,000 volunteers, and they're like, we got to go. And so early on, it was, I imagine, how funny it would have looked, not the dying, but at the first battle, because they were just so different from what they would have been later, a year or two into the war, what their uniforms would look like. It was, you got people riding out of D.C. watching the fight, like an afternoon picnic. They were repulsed by what they saw. According to Kate Cummings, she mentioned that a lot of civilians were wearing straw hats because palmettos were so common they made their own hats. Well, I don't doubt that. The hat was, a lot of the hats, except for the kepi and a couple others, but a lot of the guys wore their just hats from the farm. They were different ones. I don't have my hat in here that I used, that I bought from somebody. I always liked it, fit really well. I enjoyed fighting in it. There was all kinds of different hats, and I wouldn't look good in a kepi, so I never bought a kepi. My face is too fat. You really need a thin guy, tall, thin, young guy to wear a kepi. But I like the way they looked. They were cool. It never would have looked good on me, honestly. But anyway, that's a little bit. It didn't get too deep, but a little bit about Cleburne, and God bless his memory. What a fighter! What an amazing guy, and a short life, 36. Did a lot of things in his life, and he died well respected by both sides. John B. Gordon, I think, is another cut of that same cloth. That great respect, wounded 5 times, wasn't it, for him? And really messed his jaw up. He only was photographed from one side after that. Two kinds of the same men from different areas, obviously, but they were a cut above. And there were some that weren't that good, but these guys were very brave. And I still remember this 109th reunion at Dalton, and it brings back a lot of memories. And ours, our camp listed on there with the other camps. And we worked hard. We worked hard at this event. I'll tell you a couple of stories, though. I met at that reunion an African-American gentleman. His great-grandfather rode with Forrest. He was a scout, and he rode with Forrest. And he was very proud of his Confederate history. Very proud. In fact, he was sitting up, and they sent a news reporter down from one of the local TV stations. They sent an African-American to cover the Sons of Confederate Veterans National Reunion. And she walks in, and she sees this guy. And she's like, is that his name, Barry? What are you doing here? And the guy said, he said, honey, ain't you ever seen a black Confederate? He was a character. I got to talk to him. He was a very interesting guy. And of course, H.K. Edgerton, who, by the way, has been in some ill health. Pray for H.K. He has marched through the South, waving his Confederate flag and letting people know where he stands. Some people have treated him horribly, obviously. Across the South. A lot of people love him, but he's had some health problems. Y'all pray for H.K. Edgerton. I met him too. And he's character. But years go by. I think I thought I was old then. Now that's been quite a while ago. And great memories, though. Great memories. We did a lot of work. We made some money, and all that money went into making graveyards look better and having respect and putting up, working on monuments and whatever we did. All that hard work. It was all community minded to go and put that money back in and to honor their ancestors, to honor the graves. And listen, I'm for honoring on both sides. This is not a one-sided thing. I have family on both sides, and the Confederate soldier is and was declared a veteran of the United States as a soldier. So they're veterans. They were veterans. They got a pension, and that should settle that. General Lee was given his pardon by General President Ford. And, they really tried after the war, Lee did, to reconcile, to come back together as one nation. We are one nation under God. This is history, and we look back. Barry says there was a diary called Letters to Lucinda from James Addison McMurtry, and he claimed that he heard that a black soldier captured 11 Yankees at Chickamauga. I don't know about that if it happened, and you don't know if it could be confirmed, but it was in his letters. That would be interesting. Along with this study of the Battle of Chickamauga, I definitely want to cover Marsh, who come back to find his master's son who died there, and he stayed, and he's an interesting character. I wish I could find my book on him. I've got it somewhere in the stack of stuff. I don't know what I've done with it. I think I might know. And I'm going to look this week and see if I can find it. James Addison McMurtry was in the 9th Italian Georgia Artillery. William Everett Sprague was one of the more famous at Chickamauga. My last name is Cordell. There was a couple Cordells at the battle. I couldn't find a connection for. I thought I had. There was an Absalom Cordell at the battle. I did have an ancestor named Absalom, but he died He died young, a teenager, and he didn't make it. So it's not him. So I don't know if they're related to me or not. A lot of those units were Central Georgia, that were Georgia units, which is where mine would have came from. Or I did have some family in North Carolina. So those two areas are really where on my dad's side, where they came from. So if you know your genealogy, I'd love to cover it when not in the show. Let me get some of these characters, and then we'll look at that. But along the way, if you'll send me your information, we'll put it up and honor them, and I'll do that as well. Either side, it's a history show, and would love to. We'll be doing this show until I'm dead. You can never study it out, and it's fascinating to study. It really is. And I love biographies. I love these leaders, generals, and their story. He was a character, and I was not always liked by some, but I like Jubal Early. He's another one I like. I've been to his hometown. He was a lawyer after the war, if I remember right, in Virginia. And Jubal Early, he was a character. He got in some trouble with Lee a little bit, but he was a character. But thanks for stopping in. Thanks for being here tonight, and love to talk history. We'll go out with our theme song for Bibles and Battlefields. And next week, we'll continue to look at this battle, and we'll look at the generals who died and a poet who died at the battle, because there's some story there. This should have been made a movie a long time ago. There is a lot to study out of this. So, but thanks for stopping by. Thanks, Barry, Broski, Watchman, anybody else watching. And if I don't see your post on, some of them don't go to StreamYard. I've got some screens pulled up. I'm pulling information from, so I apologize. I'm not ignoring you. And I do cover those after the show, that or the next day. I will respond. I look for all the comments, and I do respond. If you hate me or like me, I'll respond to all of them and say, God bless you. So we'll go out some music. We'll see you in the morning for the Cornbread Band Morning Show. Have a great night. Stay warm, and pray for the country. We certainly need it. And all those who have lost loved ones in recent attacks in our country and across the world. Good has won and will win over evil, and we'll get there forthwith. And if you don't know Jesus as your personal Savior, cry out to him today and ask him to save you from your sins, and know that your name is recorded in the Lamb's Book of Life, and be ready to go. For every day is a gift, and I am thankful for my salvation. If you don't agree with that, that's fine. I'm not here to argue or debate with you, but I always want to say, study the Bible, study the Word, and ask God to show you the way. Amen. God bless you all. We'll see you soon.
We marched into the valley with fire in our eyes. But the day we took the mountain, I thought of you and I cried. I fell down to my knees and prayed, thank the Lord that I'm still here. For so long, it's been Bibles and battlefields, and all this time I've held you in my heart. And though we're worlds apart, I still hear you. And all these days I've counted down the hours, it's like 1,000 years. All this time it's been Bibles and battlefields. If there's a silver lining to this endless hell, it's the hope that one day this war will end.